I love her accent. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our monthly webinar series for Thunder Laser. This month, we're focusing on engraving leathers and leatherette. So I'll introduce the lovely, I'm going to call myself lovely, both of us are lovely two people that are hosting today. You might already know me if you've ever chatted to me on social media or on the webinars before. My name is Z Kessler, and I am the Marketing and Education Manager. So most of the time you'll see me at events. I'll often chime in on emails from here and there. And I get to be involved with our lovely ambassadors like Steve. So Steve, take it away. So Steve's one of our customers, ambassadors, and we just met recently, and I was very happy to invite him to come.
Yeah, so I'm Stephen Enns. I own Hand and Sew Leather. It's a leather supply store. We've been operating Hand and Sew for over 10 years now. So I've been doing leather for a long time. And then I've had my Thunder Laser now for just over 2 years. So it's been really fun. But yeah, I've been using lasers outside of that for over a decade. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that Steve and I happen to have an overlapping history where we never met each other. But so even how Shannon, who runs Thunder Laser, he's the sales rep for Canada, how he knows me is through the maker community, Maker Fair, and all these events for like kind of interdisciplinary people who make things. It's the idea of it is that it doesn't matter what discipline, if you're an engineer or a homesteader or like a crafter, we all have like this curiosity in common. So both Shannon and I used to run the Maker Fair. Shannon also runs a maker space. I've been involved in that kind of stuff, starting it in schools. And then funny enough, Steve, why don't you explain your history with that world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I went to Emily Carr for industrial design, which is a local design school here in Vancouver. And my first job out of school was working at the local maker spaces called Maker Labs, which was kind of a fairly new development at the time, but they're still running, providing studio spaces and wood shops and lasers. It's where I started learning how to use a laser and kind of all about lasers at that time. But yeah, spent a lot of time at the maker labs, and that was my first studio space as well for my leather business. So yeah, it's fun.
Is that the first time you'd been introduced to using laser on specifically leather, or like were you just starting to explore the laser and that leather just came about, or were you doing like handwork leather before that?
So I was doing leather for 4 or 5 years before that, and we had a laser at Emily Carr, but it was fairly locked down. You needed to book it, and you had the tech in, and you gave them your files, and they kind of did most of the work. So being at Maker Labs was kind of the first opportunity I got to have free reign and just kind of play around with a laser a bit. And then really start to like kind of integrate the leather work that I was already doing with the laser, and kind of combining them at that time.
Nice. And so I don't know how many people here have actually used their laser with leather. Maybe they're getting challenges. Maybe they're new. They don't even have their laser yet. But I would love if people could chat in the Q&A and just sort of comment their experience so we can get an idea of where to focus. But let me just see. Shannon is trying to get in here. While you do that, I will send him a link. I think try this. Oh, he's there. Okay, great. It's along the side somewhere. It's the problem right now. I only have one screen. So maybe for anyone who hasn't lasered before, Steve, you should be able to see the Q&A if you type on the chat. There's Q&A and then there's chat. So the
Q&A.
So if anyone hasn't lasered before, would you mind giving a little bit of an overview of like sort of like the things to look out for when approaching leather, different types and styles of leather, and like the different lenses and sort of why you would use certain ones and not the others? I think this is like some type of mystery to people that are first coming into laser world. But I know you're an expert.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with regards to like lasering and leather, there is a lot of information floating around. Um, for me, I've done a lot of laser engraving on leather and then a decent amount of laser cutting on leather. I know lots of people who do tons of cutting on leather. There's a few main things. So as long as we're dealing with real leather, there really shouldn't be any issues with engraving or cutting. The biggest issue is going to be that leather naturally wants to scorch. It wants to kind of char. So it's very difficult of a material to actually cut through. Um, so you'll need quite a powerful laser if you want to get through quite thick leather. Thinner leathers are actually fairly simple for almost any laser, even going down to like diode lasers to get through. You just might have to do multiple passes to get through. But in terms of the type of leather, there's all sorts of different finishes and grains and stiffnesses and all these sorts of things. Essentially, your leather depends on your project, and your leather is also going to determine what sort of laser or quality or strength of laser you'll need to cut through it. So for like upholstery leathers, like very soft leathers for like fashion, goat skins, lamb skins, it should be very easy to cut through. You shouldn't have any issue to cut or engrave on those. For thicker leathers, for like armor and stuff like that, you're using pretty beefy, pretty thick, pretty stiff leathers, which can be quite difficult to get through. And so one of the big things is kind of doing lots of testing, doing lots of learning, and trying to figure out what sort of result you're going for. You might need to do lots of masking. You might need to do lots of cleaning. Depending on the finishes on the leather, you might have to dial down or do multiple passes because you can get sometimes melting of like the different finishes and paints that are on the surface of the leather. So in my use case, I don't use the laser a ton for cutting outside of prototyping. So we don't use it for production cutting, really. We mostly use it for engraving for production. So we use it a ton for like things like keychains. We do like little engravey keychains, which are fun. This was a sample, so this one was fully cut, which is fun. But yeah, you can see stuff like these flashbacks, really difficult to get rid of. And then two, there is just an inherent smell of burned leather that we have to deal with. That is not a pleasant smell at all. And it can linger quite long in your projects. So I generally try to push people away from doing too much cutting or thinking that they can switch to doing batch leather cutting outside of very thin sort of leathers in very specific sort of situations. But in terms of tannage, you hear people talk about tannage online a lot. Oh, you can't cut chrome tan, you can only cut veg tan, so on and so forth. In my experience, talking to tanneries, it doesn't really exist. That sort of naysay towards chrome tanning. I think people, there were some people back in the day, 20 odd years ago, when the forums were first starting with lasers and becoming more of a hobbyist thing, that heard the term chrome and associated it with the metal coating. And then essentially said, okay, we can't do anything with chrome. That's a no go, which is like fair enough. But chemically, they're very similar. The results from cutting are going to be chemically very identical, veg tan or chrome tan. So I wouldn't worry too much about the tannage. The big thing that can make a big difference in your cutting or your engraving is the finish or the coating on it. So if it's a very heavily painted leather, there's a high likelihood we're putting a lot of heat, a lot of power in one specific spot. There's a really big chance that you're going to get a lot of melting on your surface and maybe not nice edges, which you're expecting. So I think it's playing around, thinking about what you're looking for, and trying to go from there. For me, I'm looking at mostly very light finishes on leather, Very stiff leathers. We're doing stuff like wallet samples. We're doing stuff like keychain samples, and that sort of thing. I see a question from Shannon here about masking. Masking helps a ton. We use just like a paper mask on the top side, and even you could use it on the bottom side as well. Helps a ton with engraving and stopping flashback or even soot transfer across, especially unfinished leathers, like a natural veg tan, which is that like kind of creamy, skinny color. You'll see if you have the soot traveling across the surface, you'll see a big streak, and you can't really get rid of it. You can't sand it in the same way that you can with wood. You can use soap and water to a certain degree, but it'll probably still stain. So, yeah, this particular one I did use a mask on, and it worked wonderful. Super easy to engrave through.
So I'm guessing like what you were saying about sometimes it's a little bit more tricky with the repetitive cutting. I'm guessing that's why people like the leatherettes then.
Yes. Yeah, very consistent, very especially like the it's made for a laser. They're very consistent, they're very throughout, right? They're specifically purposed, right? So it's designed for being used in that sort of scenario. So yeah, it's really good in that regard. The other thing that we run into with leather is, especially with engraving, I know in wood when we're engraving or in acrylic, we're always looking for a very specific, very like in wood we're looking for like the darkest dark we can in our engrave. In acrylic we're looking for a nice like sort of satiny finish. In leather, it's not as simple. It's a natural material. There is a lot of variance within it, and a lot of times when we engrave, because of the different surface, the or the tightness of the grain underneath, the type of color or dye that might be in it, you can get very different results. You might have two black leathers, and one of them will engrave like a nice kind of chocolatey brown underneath, and the other one will just engrave black. So it can be a little frustrating in that way, especially because you don't know what you're dealing with until you've got it and you ran a test. So I think those sorts of reasons are the reasons that people are mostly using leatherettes, is especially for the engravings, where you can get like leatherette that engraves black and it engraves to silver, which is like something we can't really do with leather, right? We can't engrave something lighter with leather, but with leatherettes, you can kind of build that stuff into the product. And yeah, it allows for a lot more consistency in that.
We've been looking up. One of the things that we're doing is we're going to start bringing in some leatherettes soon. So everyone stay tuned for that in our shop. So yeah, it's really neat seeing all the different color combinations, because it's a bit like they design it a bit like a lamicoid, like a 2-layer acrylic, but it's, you've got the top color and then you can engrave like reveal silver or reveal gold or reveal black underneath. And that's such an interesting, I think visually it's really interesting. It all depends on your application, of course. There's lots of times where like, it's kind of obvious that it's leatherette versus leather. It's nice to have the real leather for certain things. So you were saying that at your shop, I'm sure a lot of you saw the ad. That's why you probably came here. As Steve was talking about making templates, I'm not sure how many of you are interested in that, but I had never thought about that beforehand. So do you want to talk a little bit more about how, maybe is it like a lot of handmade leather or hand leather working people that buy those types of products from you? Like, so maybe they're just learning for the first time and they want something that's like going to turn out the way they want it to.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of people. We make templates out of acrylic. Let me go grab one real quick. So we make a lot of these sorts of things. So like this one's for like belts and straps and that sort of thing. So you can see. We did some like engraving at the bottom there, but this still has not the paper on it. But it's for consistency. So a lot of leather workers obviously can't afford to necessarily buy like cutting presses or all of these things, and or when you're dealing with patterns like this, the kind of way to make this pattern on your own is just to cut it by hand. And so you're dealing with, if I make this thing and then I'm going to make 100 belts, I'm now kind of beholden to how well I cut that initial pattern, right? If my hole was a 1/4 inch off here, or an 1/8 inch off, or even a millimeter off, I'll see that throughout all of my production. So just having consistency is really nice. And then having something that's acrylic is really nice, not only because it's never ever going to move. So most patterns that we are dealing with and production places we're dealing with previous to acrylic would be paper patterns. And so the more you scribe around it, the paper kind of gets crumpled and it shrinks and it moves and the edges curl and all these sorts of things. So having something that's acrylic, not only you can run a little scribe around this as many times as you want and it's not really going to move, but you can even do stuff like run a knife right up against it and use it straight up for cutting, which is super convenient. So for our customers, it just provides like a really quick way to make something that would have been very difficult for them to get otherwise, right? So to get a pre-made thing like this isn't the easiest, and it gives them that consistency. For like people who have a laser, being able to rip out like a perfect 1.5 inch roundover is like worth its weight in gold. Like to try to do this by hand requires a lot of templating, a lot of patterning, and you can buy punches that do this, but they're not exactly perfect. They have some wiggle room to them. So it's like, even for me, there'll be some times where I'm making a pattern for something and I want a very specific arc, and to try to sketch out an arc and then transfer it onto paper and then cut it out and have it for my like bag flap or something. It's way easier just to drop into Illustrator, draw the arc that I want, and then laser cut out a little piece. And I know it's perfect. It's symmetrical. It's a perfect arc. It's going to do exactly what I want. And trying to do all of that stuff manually is quite difficult. So yeah, we do a lot of these for all
That
sorts
sounds like
of
you,
things. So like this is
sounds like
belts,
you've been
but
on
yeah,
both sides of this. You're like, I
yeah,
know
yeah,
what it
yeah,
was like. It was frustrating.
yeah, yeah. Not fun.
I'm gonna put Shannon on here. I mean, just for voice so that he can bring up any questions he wants. He's probably making a coffee, but listening to us. There he is. Shannon, do you want to be on video or just audio?
Video's fine.
Okay, you know, you never know. It's morning, right?
I'm wearing.
He's wearing clothes. It's all good.
Good. Perfect.
Okay, it'll take a second. He'll pop on here.
Leatherette right there. Of course, my lighting is terrible, but
Hold on, your video's not showing for some reason. Give it a second. First I made you audio only, and now I made you video, so it might take a second to pop back on there. Yeah, Shannon, if you don't know, runs a makerspace. It was one of the founders of a makerspace. Now he focuses more on under stuff, but so of course, somewhere like that has a lot of people coming in making a lot of different projects, like from business ideas to art to cosplay, sort of all over the map. And so you kind of end up learning a lot about different materials that, you know, sometimes are common, sometimes less common. We've sort of seen it all. Let's see. I don't know why I can't see your video, Shannon, but are you there in audio?
well, can you hear me? I'm seeing
Yep.
my video on the screen, which is a little strange, but yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things that drew us into lasers in the first place was at the makerspace being able to have lasers to do weird projects, and because everybody comes in with some new harebrained idea, and then we figure out a way to make it happen. There's a lot of learning that happens along the way. So we've seen a little bit of everything, but it's really helpful for us to work with people like Steve, who has seen a lot of one thing, or your knowledge is so much deeper in a specific area, whereas our knowledge is more shallow but broad. So we really depend on our community for that kind of expertise, for sure. Is there something that you wanted me to specifically comment on, Z?
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about leatherette and like things to look out for, and because I know we're about to start selling leatherette, and I'm sure a lot of people are curious about leatherette because it's sort of a newish product, I suppose, at least the laserable stuff.
Yeah, and the cool thing about leatherette too is that like the limitations that Steve was talking about with the real product, right? And like it's fun. Like we still use leather. I use leather especially if you're building something that's meant to take wear and tear, then leatherette's likely not your solution, right? Leatherette is your solution for something that you want to be visible and that you want to be able to effortlessly get the very specific tones and colors that you want, right? So the hat, which I hear you can't see, has a leatherette patch on it that's blue on the front and silver behind it. Those types of colors don't, you wouldn't be able to do that with leather. But there's, yeah. So with leatherette, you can get different thicknesses and different colors. The other thing that we're seeing now is getting leatherette with like patterns on them, like denim or marble or stuff like that, and then be able to engrave off the pattern and reveal another pattern or another color underneath. The one thing that I've noticed about the leatherette is that you certainly benefit from the higher precision engraving that you get with the RF tubes, like the bolt or the Stephen, as you probably know, your machine is now called a Bolt Pro, but it was called an Odin when you got it. The quality that you get from engraving with those tubes is noticeably better than you would get with the Nova series. Now that said, my hat, which has some really very like detailed patterns on it, was made with a Nova 63, which according to the prevailing wisdom on the internet, shouldn't be able to do this sort of thing, but our machines are able to do it quite well. I think sometimes once you've seen the difference between the RF tube and the glass tube, then you're like, okay, I need to use the RF tube. But before that, and if you're not like as a just a general consumer, you may not notice it. But yeah, it is certainly nice to have the extra detail, because with leatherette, you're often doing really, really precise and small things. So like very detailed.
I think if I'm not wrong, too, with the leatherette, you're doing a pretty light engrave. Like you're not going super deep, right?
That's another really good point. Is it's sometimes hard, like with the RF tubes, you can dial down your power to be like, a fraction of a percent. With the glass tubes, your cutoff is often like 8 or 11%, right? So think of that. So at 130 watt, if your cutoff power is 10%, that means your lowest power engraving is 13 watts, right? So that's like that's actually still pretty powerful. It's going to be hard to engrave and carefully remove layers of something when your minimum power is like that high. It's kind of like thinking of, you're doing some jewelry, you're tapping with a jewelry, you should be tapping with a jewelry hammer, but instead you've got like a framer's hammer there. It's hard to get that precision to be just right. So yeah, I think for leatherette and leather, certainly the best kind of tool for the job would be the Bolt or the new Nova Plus, which now the Nova Pluses have the RF tubes in them. Actually, we're pretty excited about that as well. Starting now and later in the year, now we've got the Nova 24s and the Nova 35s with the 60 watt RF tubes. So that gives you some kind of the best of both worlds, the ability to cut well because it's got the cutting head on it. But if you need to engrave with it,
Did it go quiet?
We lost them, I think.
Oh, shoot. You know why? I tried to share my screen. I thought I could do it at the same time as he's talking to him. I can't. Then you can
Guess
go back
not.
on.
Oops. There's
That's
a
the
question
host.
here I can
Yeah, let's get
take
that
while
until
we're
Graham
going
gets
if you
back.
want.
Sortion.
Yeah. So Gerard here said, as a furniture maker and restorer, I've used Mohawk burn-in balm to protect areas adjacent to the area where I'm using heat to melt in a hard wax. Can that be used on leather for the same purpose? I Googled that product quickly. I don't exactly know what it is. It seems like it's some sort of like a protectant that goes on the surface. So generally with leather, because we have different leathers that'll have different levels of finish on them, anything else that you put on top, if it is some sort of protectant, you could have it stick on. But if you have a leather that's already pretty finished, you might be able to use that Mohawk product on top of that finish, and then you can take it off after the fact. With these sorts of things, it's always best to just do some testing and see. um Generally trying to make a product like that work with the laser, like the heat that you're using with a heat gun is very different than the heat with a laser. But you can always test it and see what works. Yeah, I see Shannon's back now.
That
Back
sounds
and
a bit.
you
That
can
sounds a
see
bit
your
like
hat.
spraying wood with like varathane and then engraving through the varathane, and then you've got that layer of wax or whatever protecting the leather.
Yeah, yeah,
I've
that
never tried it, but it'd be interesting to try
yeah,
that.
that might work. There are products I have worked with. I have noticed if you finish your leather first with like a nice like acrylic based finish or something like that, and then you're engraving, your soot is way less likely to get soaked into the leather, and you can wipe it off a lot better. So yeah, if it works in that way, that might work for sure.
I don't remember what I was talking about when
Talking
Z
about
rudely
the
cut me off.
plus. So I was trying to present and share my screen, but it turns out it kicks you off while I was trying to do that. So I put the link in the chat for anyone that wants to know about the Nova Plus. The reason why we're bringing that up is because, like the Bolt, it is an RF tube, and it's it's quite high quality for like doing engraving, and it's sort of like a big bang for your buck in terms of you can get a little bit better, bigger bed size. You have more ability to cut thicker materials than the regular Bolt series, but it also has the RF tube, so you can get some pretty good precision on your engraving. But the highest precision engraving is on the Bolt Plus. So if you want the highest of the highest,
The Bolt Plus and the Bolt Pro have the RF coherent tube in it, and that's the one that Steve is using, which has an even smaller dot point than we'll see in the Nova series or the Nova Plus or the Bolt. That said, I mean, I have a Bolt, and I am just always impressed with how awesome my engraving quality is without even trying. It certainly is a step above the glass tubes. So, or a couple steps above the glass tubes when you're doing that really precise stuff.
I'm going to show
A big
your.
selling point. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you want to hold up your hat now that your video is working? I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
can see it
please.
super well, but for the regular Bolt, like the original, the most affordable one, it does like a 4-point font size. But if you go to the next ones up from there, like the Plus up, it does 3-point font size. But this was made on a Nova, and it's pretty good. Like it's still, I don't know what size of font that is, but I'm going to guess like 6 or 7 or something.
My finger for scale. The thing that impresses me is this line in the T here, like that line, that detail there. That's really hard to do on a Nova series, but one of our customers made this and knocked it out with a Nova 63. And so it's kind of funny because you hear the bigger glass tubes have a bigger dot point on them. So people say that the 130 watt are terrible for engraving. Well, they're actually, if you dial them in, they're actually pretty damn good still. So it's not like this type of quality would be trivial to achieve with the Bolt or the Bolt Pro series, but with the Nova series, it still can be done. So, the other thing to just, if we're talking about machines here, if I can throw this in, The Bolt series machines have different heads than the Nova series. The Nova series, the heads, the air blows straight down, where the Bolt series, the air blows in from the side like this. And what you get with that is the material that's burned off doesn't stick to the surface of whatever you're engraving on as much, because it's being blown across the material instead of right directly down onto it. So the bolts are better for engraving because the heads are lighter and they can accelerate faster, and the airflow is different, and so you don't have nearly as much cleanup with the bolts. So even though with the new Nova Plus, you get the benefit of the high resolution tube, the bolts are still better for engraving.
The thing I really like about the RF tubes in specific is the fact that you don't have to have a chiller or anything like that. And for me, at least, I work in a workshop, and it can get pretty cold in here. And I know a lot of people who are looking at getting lasers are looking at putting them in their garage. So having an RF tube means you don't have to worry about that whole component ever breaking or cracking or temperature or anything like that, because it's all air cooled. So it just has some fans that run. So I love how bulletproof it is in that scenario, on top of all of the like speed and engraving.
Raise your hand if you've ever blown up a glass tube by freezing it.
I'm sure many people, I see it all the time in the Facebook group.
I mean, there is, to be clear, antifreeze is a thing, and it works. And I didn't do that, and I should have, and I should know better. Mind you, this is before I was running Thunder Laser, so it's back. This is the benefit of my mistakes. I hope to pass on to the community. But yeah, the glass tubes with the chiller, a little bit more thought has to go into that. Although I am always impressed with, like, I've had like 6-7 lasers with chillers in our makerspace, and I've never really had any issues with them. They just kind of work once you plug them in. And we have one of them that's next to our CNC, and it gets covered in sawdust, and it's I just don't understand how it still works as well as it does. So but certainly not having to think about it, just having the fan cooled is definitely a benefit.
I see a question here.
Yeah.
So somebody, Elizabeth, is asking about engraving with a diode laser. You can absolutely. When it comes to engraving leather, you actually don't need a ton of power, which is kind of why the RF lasers can be nice in that scenario. You can really dial it down and go very, very light, because we're not actually we're sintering the surface. We're not actually creating almost any depth here. You can see very, very, very little depth. So we're mostly just burning. So diode lasers, I know a ton of people who, if you're just trying to play around, I know that they can work well.
If I can just jump in here, though, the difference between like the Bolt and a diode laser is hilarious in terms of speed. So, So if the diode lasers are great if you're doing a gift for your aunt or something, but as soon as somebody comes up to you and says, "I want 50 of these," you will quickly realize why the diode is the wrong machine.
I mean, you look up videos. Look up videos.
I don't know how much
like something like this would take so long.
Like 10 times faster. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, at least. I mean, I think this took maybe like 30 seconds on the laser, possibly less. I know that it would take at least 5 minutes on a diode laser to just engrave this. If you had it oriented this way, it'd be 10 minutes,
And just for some context for people listening, the reason why that is the diode lasers, and the bigger power you get, the more this is an issue, is with the diodes, all the weight is in the head, right? So the benefit of the Bolt is the heads themselves have very little to them. They're aluminum kind of chassis with a lens on them. and the beam kind of like the lens here, and the beam kind of comes in from the side, and all the laser has to do is move that head around, and because it's so light, it can accelerate and decelerate it really quickly. So when you're doing like thousands of lines to get what you need to get the detail that you're trying to get, being able to get your head up to speed really quickly and slow it down really quickly makes all the difference in the world. Somebody might advertise that their laser can engrave at 300 millimeters a second or 1,000 millimeters a second. But if they don't have a light head and they don't have really good motors in it, then it doesn't matter, because if you're engraving something this far and it takes you 3 times as long to slow down your head and speed it up again, it doesn't matter how fast the engraving is. The amount of time it takes to turn your head around is ridiculous, right? It's the difference between taking a small, like a sports car on a road and like driving quarter mile versus a semi with a big load on it where you have to like shift up 18 gears to get up to speed.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of what you're talking about.
We've playing around in Lightburn with some cheaper lasers with some friends. You can see if you do like the test on Lightburn, you can see the acceleration on both sides. And with the cheaper lasers, it can be, if you push the acceleration or the speed too high, it actually takes longer.
I know.
Because you're overrunning.
When I'm doing my laser,
it's funny.
When I'm doing my laser workshops, I'll often show people the difference between the Bolt and even the Nova, right? Which has a heavier head because it's a cutting head. But a diode is much, much worse than that. So I'll take like a 2-inch circle, and I'll say, let's engrave this at 300 millimeters a second and 1,000 millimeters a second. And I want to bet you what the time difference is. So if it takes like 25 seconds to do it at 300 millimeters a second, how long is it going to take at 1,000? And people say, oh, well, obviously it's going 3 times as fast, so it'll be less. No, the answer is slightly more, right? Like it takes slightly longer because you're taking so much time to accelerate and decelerate that even though you're engraving faster, that does not mean a faster engrave. And to be clear, if you're running full speed engraves, that's handy if you're doing something really large. But doing things that are really small, you never do them at full speed because it's actually slower. Now, the Bolt and the Bolt Pro are much better at that. So you can get away with running at a much higher speed, and your real time, and even if you're engraving at 300 or 500 millimeters a second, your engraving time on a Bolt will be, 30, maybe 50% faster than on a Nova, because the amount of time that it takes to accelerate and decelerate is so much lower.
See, this is like why we have the laser expert nerds here. Most people don't. Yeah,
it's a really good bar trick. If you want to win $20, bet them how long it's going to take if we engrave it at twice the speed. That's really only works for laser nerds. But yeah, people won't believe that it takes longer to do something 3 times as fast. Somebody says, sorry, that was Z that said that. Wondering if Steve has experience. I haven't used a diode. I've wanted to, because just to get knowledge, and I have lots of friends that have diode lasers and love them. They're great machines for doing stuff for yourself. As soon as you do it, running a business with a diode laser is pretty much doesn't make sense, because as soon as you're going to do 10 or 20 or 50 of something, it breaks down.
I wanted to chat about laser safe materials, because I know that, like you were saying, Steve, that most like pure leathers are fine, like they won't have any issues. But when you start to get to the leatherettes, you want to look for something that says laser safe, but also it's kind of useful to ask for like a material data safety sheet from the manufacturer. Some people will lie, but it's nice to find reliable companies that someone has purchased things from. That's why we're starting to sell this kind of stuff in our online shop. If you haven't seen it,
I think most of the stuff that's branded as Leatherette is safe for lasering. Just to be clear, any of the stuff that has the 2-layer stuff, the 2-layer colors, which is what you would want to be, there would be no sense in buying leather, if it like leatherette, if it didn't have that, right? The stuff that you would avoid is PVC, more of my air quotes, PVC leather, which is like faux leather, and I don't think it's ever branded as leatherette. It's like the cheap fake leather. Leatherette is not that. But yeah, anything just as a general rule, anything that has the C in the PVC, like the chlorine in that, is a bad idea to use with your laser, because chlorine, when you burn it, it creates chlorine gas, which is very murdery. It is also acidic and will eat away at the inside of your laser. So even if you don't mind like the murdery part, it's bad for your machine. So don't use it. Also frowned upon by the Geneva Convention. So, it's just a bad idea.
So that's actually a good distinction. So I didn't even realize that. So leatherette is a different product than fake leather or vegan leather. They sound like just like synonyms, but they're actually different. That's good to know if you're ever searching for products. And like we said, we'll just bring some in as well so that you guys don't have to look. But we're about to go on a trip to source that kind of stuff for you guys. I have a link here I'm going to put in the chat of like some laser safe materials, because people have a lot of questions about that, like which things, and there's some things in there. You'll see we link to some other sites where one site might say, yeah, it's okay, and the other one might not. So some of the things are like not highly toxic, but like it's more a matter of how good is your ventilation? How often are you doing it? Are you breathing it in all day, every day? Some things you can get away with doing like once or twice or whatever, and it's fine. If your ventilation's great, you can probably do it more often. But I will set the link in the thing here.
Yeah, remember too that a lot of the kind of the science in air quotes again that comes with this is done by people that have very unsafe, non-industrial type machines, right? Ones that may not even have any ventilation, right? So it's a bad idea to cut a lot of materials if 100% of those particulate you're going to breathe in your lungs, right? Shooting stuff, like taking everything in your cabinet and blowing outside, is a much safer thing than just leaking it into the room. And there's ways, and thunder laser machines are built for manufacturing. So the specs, the safety of that is significantly different than a lot of the home-based machines.
Nancy likes your murdery reference. Okay, let me just see. One of the other things, we have 17 minutes technically left. One of the things I thought was really cool that you were doing, Steve, is making like stamps and stuff for leather. Can you talk a little bit about using the laser for that?
For sure. Yeah. So it was one of the reasons that I wanted to get outside of just obviously engraving the leather is in leatherworking, we use brass stamps a ton. So like literally a big chunk of brass that gets CNC'd. We can get them made locally or get them made overseas. But like this, even something this small we're talking 70, 90, 100, $200, depending on where it's getting made. Very expensive. But this works really well for stamping on leather. So especially natural leathers like vegetable tan leathers, they take just straight up pressure stamps really well. So you just need to literally press this in with a bunch of pressure, either via a hammer or a press, and you can get some really nice results. So for me, we can easily have dozens or hundreds of these per year that we're making, and so it can add up really quick. And so I can make them out of thicker acrylic. So by making it out of acrylic, I get a very similar sort of profile and result. I don't need to go nearly as thick or deep with this one, but my favorite thing to do is to show the results. So one of these was done with an acrylic and one of these was done with brass. You can't really tell which is which. That's the answer for anyone wondering. This one's acrylic. But so for me, being able to make the acrylic cost on this, I actually got this as an offcut, which is kind of why it has this funny line on the backside. So I got this for free from a friend. But even if you were to buy a big sheet of this, the cost on this would be probably $1 or less. So for me, being able to go from 80, 90, $100 to $1 is huge. And this takes a few passes, right? It can take 5, 6 minutes, maybe. I don't know. It goes so fast, but it does not take very much time at all. So from this, I have to CNC this. I have to get it done. If I'm getting it done locally, it's like $200-300, and it'll take at least 48 plus hours. If I'm getting it done overseas, we add a week to get it shipped and everything like that, paying $100. This, I can make the file, have it within 5 to 10 minutes, right? Which is pretty cool and pretty like crazy. And for even for production, or if you are doing a level of production, we have a lot of clients where they'll make custom goods for someone, and then that person wants maybe their initials in a certain font, or they want a company logo, right, on a bag or a wallet or something like that. So being able to make this just for a one-off, and you're doing that consistently and constantly, makes so much sense. And then we talk about, this is a small little guy. We do something like a coaster, right? Coaster is like 4 inches. We've got a big brass stamp. I've made them before, but those things are like $300 or $400 for that amount of CNC and brass. Again, a few dollars of acrylic, and takes maybe 10 or 20 minutes to make. And so it's really quick returns on these sorts of projects where it's a 1-for-1 result, and the results are at the end are identical. And being able to just take my tooling and turn it from a really expensive thing that I have to outsource to something that I can do in house is worth so much, and just really is really fun. I can test things out with it really quickly, which is nice.
There may be some middle ground here too. We're getting the Aurora Light in our showroom here, and in theory,
Yeah,
I should be able to engrave your brass stuff with that. Although depth is really hard, so I'd be curious to see how long something like that would take. I bet you it would still take like 10 hours or something to engrave, but at least it would be local. At least it would be like, to get that kind of depth on it, it'll definitely take a while. But I'd be interested to see, like, you should send us some files, and we can do some testing and see what we get out of it.
Yeah, there are some places that we source from that do use a laser to do it. So I think it makes sense, because this is overkill for depth for 90% of stuff. So you can go lighter than that, about probably half depth, like closer to the acrylic one, and be totally fine. The brass ones, I've been looking at them. They're quite cool, just because we do brass sometimes for certain leathers. So for softer leathers or more like spongy leathers, you do need to heat this up. So obviously you can't do that with acrylic.
Yeah.
So you do need to use brass in those situations, or if you're using like foil or something like that, you do need to use brass. So it might be nice to have it in those sort of specific situations. You do have a lot more cost, obviously, in your brass, just the raw materials, but it's really nice to have those options.
Yeah. Yeah, I just did an event in Manitoba with the Aurora Light, and it was a lot of fun because you're engraving different materials, and it's a totally different paradigm. And we have some samples of things that are like your brass set there. I haven't done them, and I know that they're like dig in, because it will take a while. But I'd like to try.
We have a few customers that are starting to do the 3D kind of engraves on the Aurora. Brother Wood, if you look him up, he's got a few coins he's been working on. So we have 10 minutes left. So everyone, if you have burning questions you haven't asked yet, put them in the chat.
There is a burning question there about fires with Leatherette. And somebody else said that I cut a ton, never flame, never burn or scorch. I have seen it flame up if you don't turn the air on. Like, it's really, I've never had any concern or any issue with flaming on Leatherette, as long as there was some airflow. It doesn't. It's not. You don't need much. And it was only on the cutting too. Actually on the engraving, sometimes you'll get a little bit of flame that will pop up, but that is totally fine. That's also safe. But yeah, it's the airflow, the amount of airflow that kind of determines that. I would say that leatherette is because it won't sustain a burn. Whereas if you're cutting sometimes thin strips of acrylic and that bubbles up, sometimes that will keep burning. That's where fires and lasers become an issue. Or if you're using a wood that doesn't that has holes in it and stuff, and the voids will they'll burn inside the voids or stuff like that. There's chances that type of material might burn, and that would say would be more of an issue than leatherette.
Post a safety article I wrote. Sure, we can add more to it, but there's some basics there. The last thing I wanted to touch on before the end of the webinar is, so Steve, you've had your laser for like 2 years. What is sort of like your cost of maintaining it and like your routine look like?
So it's very minimal. I don't have to do very much to it at all. I got it came with some lens wipes and cleaner, and I pretty much use that every time, or if I'm doing a long run of cutting or engraving, I'll do that, especially with these stamps. These I'm removing a decent amount of material, so I get some crusty throughout. But I usually just clean that with a rag, take off any excess, and then keeping the lenses and the mirrors clean is kind of the main thing. So I've pulled the mirrors, I think, twice in those 2 years. I don't use the laser a ton every day. It's not running 24/7 like it is in some shops. I'm usually running it 1 day a week for a handful of hours, just to do production of our our templates and stuff like that, or if I'm doing some stamps and stuff like that. So we maybe have a fewer hours than if somebody was doing 24/7 production. But yeah, the nice thing about the what is it? It's called the Bolt Pro, right? So Odin, the big one, is the mirror, the lens just pops out really simply, just 2 little screws. It pops out really nicely. It's very easy to get in and around it and clean. And then the other mirrors all pop out quite nicely, or you can reach them with a swab quite simply. So it's really easy to like kind of see how everything is doing and hit it if you need to, but don't have to touch it too much, which is nice.
There's a little you want to vacuum out the dust every once in a while, but the cleaning part is easy enough that when I go to do a new engraving or a new cut, and in the makerspace, I don't know who's done what before. I just by default clean it because it only takes like 15 seconds, right? Like it's really easy to pop that lens out and check it, give it a wipe, and wipe the mirrors, and then you know you're going to get a good cut and you're ready to go. So like the maintenance on these, we have a makerspace, we have tons of machines in it. The maintenance on the lasers is so much less than any of the other machines. And Thunder Laser builds the machines to be very easily maintainable. I remember previously we had a laser from somebody else, and it took like a good 3 minutes of wrestling to get the lens out to clean it. Nobody cleaned the lens, right? Like we kept on burning out lenses because people just didn't bother because it was so much effort. Well, the only time we burned out a lens with the Thunder Laser is because somebody was helpful and decided to unplug our air, and then we didn't have any air assist, and then 2 hours of engraving and the lenses were burnt out. So our lens was burnt out. But yeah. By the way, somebody had mentioned when we're going to be stocking Leatherette. Z and I are going on a trip on April 9th to the 23rd. We'll be coming back with some samples. Contact us if you want to try them out. But we're hoping to bring them in as quick as possible after that. By the way, we were going to go the easy route and work with an American supplier for this product. American suppliers buy the stuff from China. They might modify it or put adhesive on and then send it out. That's the same product. But then now they're being tariffed coming in from China to the States, and then being tariffed a second time coming from the States to Canada. So it has become very frustrating and untenable as a Canadian to buy Leatherette from American sources. So and it is a better long-term plan. And our goal is to provide our customers with the highest quality, lowest cost product. And really, you can't do that without going to the source. So that's what we are doing in a couple weeks.
I think going to the source to directly, you know exactly what you're getting, right? Like
Yeah.
going through secondary, they might tell you something, but if you can talk to the manufacturer, it's why we go direct to tannery for a lot of our stuff that we bring in, or we bring in a lot of tools and stuff, and just going direct, if you can swing it, it's so much nicer for your customers.
Yeah, it's a little bit more effort, and these guys had developed a brand that was respected, and that's great too. But yeah, it's just this current, yeah, and just from like fundamentally over the long term, I think as Canadians we need to support each other, and we need to be more resilient internally, and this all helps with that. So it's I think a good choice.
And when we start releasing the Leatherette to the shop, we'll also put out some surveys of other things to see what else you want, because Steve also sells some like pre-made like keychains and stuff like that for people, especially
Yeah.
they want a certain amount of them, and they, so I will send out a survey to see if anyone's interested in that, and like what size, what shape, all that sort of thing. But I thought I'll do that when we start the leather. We should have done this webinar then, but I just thought it was too cool of an opportunity. So we might do another leather webinar when we actually release it. But yeah,
that'd be good.
Thanks so much everyone for coming. We have like a couple minutes left. Last second, yeah, email us, Nancy, and I'll put your email on our Discord channel. Just be like, these are all the people that want samples. We'll probably sell some sample packs that are like a little bit cheaper, just so you can try them out. We're going to start selling some sample packs for different types of wood as well, just for customers that have already bought from us or are going to buy from us, that are some things in our shop. That's coming up soon, not quite yet, but almost. And yeah, we just released MDF and Baltic birch in different sizes and thicknesses in our shop. We don't have a URL branded for our shop yet. We're just linking to it from our main website for now, but we will soon. We don't know what to call it yet, but we'll figure it out. But that's the link I put in there. It's a Shopify one. So yeah, feel free to check it out, and check often. We'll change the banner on our website, and we'll update our social media whenever we add something new, and it'll be probably every month or so, or sometimes even more than once a month, we'll add some new stuff. So thanks everyone for coming. Feel free, the email that's going to go to you right after this, you can book a call with Shannon if you have more specific laser questions. I linked you to Steve's website as well in the follow-up email, and Instagram, as well as the link to join our next webinar, which is going to go more in depth about all the different lasers we have and comparing them, because I think with the new Nova, people have a lot of questions, like, it's called the Nova, but it's not a glass tube. It's a Nova Plus. It has an RF tube. How does it compare to the Bolt? How does it compare to the Nova? I think a lot of people have questions. So we'll spend a lot more time on that part next month. So hopefully we see you there. And if not, maybe someone else that's curious that wants to learn more about lasers. So thank you for joining. Thanks, Steve, so much for your knowledge and expertise. And thanks, Shannon, for waking up and being here. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
You can check our webinar playlist if you want to see a recording of this. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.